welcome to Saturday Mourning Cartoons, the Collider weekly podcast for all things animation, including reviews and interviews, coming to you from the Kouga Ninja Clan. I'll be your co-host, Sean Paul Ellis, and joining me from the Iga Ninja Clan, who's also happened to be reading Romeo and Juliet, my co-host, Dave Trumboard. David, how's it going, bud?
Going real good, just catching up on a classic. How about you? What you been up to over there? Did you say COVID Ninja Clan?
No, Kouga?
Oh, that's much better. I mean, you're our mortal enemies for centuries and centuries, but woof, I was real concerned that there was a COVID Ninja Clan that came out. We don't need that. We don't need COVID-powered ninjas in the year 2020. Scrap that.
Yeah, wow. If there was ever anything to cancel. 2020 has been a year so far, so... And when I say year and it sounds like a question, I really mean this has obviously felt like it's a decade inside of a year, so This is where we are, gang.
Which is why we stay home and read classics like Romeo and Juliet, slightly skewed and maybe reimagined in the feudal Japan era, just for fun, for no reason at all.
During this point, though, we have a great opportunity, though, to go back and look through all of our listener recommendations.
True, we have to.
Which is super fun because we have to. Yeah. Again, Dave, why do we have to do it?
Cartoon lawyers.
Cartoon
law, the ironclad cartoon law.
They are in our face every day saying, why haven't you listened to all of these listener reviews?
But socially distant and respectful.
Yeah, it's normally over a Skype call.
Yeah.
So nobody's ever actually coming to our house.
In our camera lens.
Unless it's in person to hand us a cease and desist.
True, which happens more often than you might think.
Yep. So we have had a chance to go through and look through all of these different listener suggestions. We get a very special one. We've had this one in queue, and we have been waiting to listen and watch this cartoon. Charles from Michigan has called in, and he has told us why we should watch today's program, Basilisk. So we're going to get into this, but we're actually going to hear from Charles. So we're going to turn this over to Charles to tell us a little bit why we should watch Basilisk. So Charles, take it away.
Hey, this is Charles from Michigan. I would like to suggest the cartoon Basilisk. It is an amazing anime. I want to say it came out 2004, 2005. By Gonzo-animated. It is the greatest version of Romeo and Juliet because it's Romeo and Juliet plus politics plus magical ninjas. Nothing is cooler than magical ninjas. There's a follow-up series which is total garbage. Totally avoid that one. The show is just simply called Basilisk. Also, there's a cool option of maybe reading the novel it's based on called the Kouga Ninja Scrolls. Great show, Romeo and Juliet, politics, ninjas. Love the podcast. Have a good one.
Awesome, Charles. Thank you so much. Also, nothing is cooler?
I don't know, man. That's pretty cool.
Absolutely nothing is cooler. I mean, I get magical ninjas being cool, but nothing is cooler?
I think it's definitely cooler than Romeo and Juliet. Now, I mean,
whoa.
Yeah, no, shots fired. I'm canceled. I know.
What was it? Did Shakespeare just join this podcast?
You might have. Special guest on next week's episode.
You bailed on that idea real fast, Dave.
It is true, though. Like Romeo and Juliet, obviously the story's been done a million different ways, but yet this is the first time that I was like, oh, add like super-powered, superhuman ninja fights into the middle of it. Okay, that's something I haven't seen before. So thanks to Charles for bringing this to our attention.
You didn't read the original and just insert that in your brain to like make it a little easier to read?
Like Pride and Prejudice and Zombies?
Yeah.
Yeah, no. If I did, I would have written it, 60 years ago before Yamada did, and I would have been a millionaire by now.
And you didn't watch the Baz Luhrmann version of Romeo and Juliet and just assume that everybody that was in there was a ninja?
I mean, I now want that.
Okay.
I wouldn't mind that. Oh. I wouldn't mind a modern retelling of Basilisk over another Romeo and Juliet tale, but yeah.
Perfect.
Were you familiar at all with this before we actually had it from our listener suggestion?
Yes, but I'll explain why when we actually get into it.
Well, okay then.
Well, I mean, it's hard it's hard to watch this and not draw a parallel to another piece from 1993 that you cannot distinguish it from. So there were moments where I was like, wait, am I watching something that I watched a lot in college.
Same.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm on board. So, and I think everybody who's probably familiar with Basilisk and or Ninja Scroll is familiar with what I'm saying.
Yep.
So, no worries there. But we want to thank Charles for reaching out. A lot of people have reached out over social media, Twitter or Facebook, or in the comments of YouTube's. Guess what? It's impossible to keep track of that because you're just screaming into the void of the internet. And because we don't want that, we want to take those recommendations that you guys have and we want to be able to include it in the actual episode like we were able to include Charles. We have that mechanism. Guys, it's 2020 and we have that technology. So everybody, we really recommend, if you want to tell us to watch a cartoon, go to the bio of any of our social media accounts, click on that link tree. I think it's the second button. It will take you right to a suggestion form. Or there's also a number, 202-681-4406. If you call that, we will 100% review that cartoon. Our cartoon lawyers say we have to review all the ones that are call-ins. If you write one in, we're hopefully going to get to it if we haven't already eventually. But anybody who leaves a message, you take priority, and we love you. So, and it also just makes sure that we can ensure the proper shout out that you get in the actual episode. Don't worry about being able to write down any of this. Just go to our social media, click that link tree, pull up that button. You can drop us a review. We will review your cartoon. Can't wait to do it. And I mean, we have to. Cartoon lawyers. Don't know what else to tell you.
Otherwise, you go to cartoon prison, and then we can't do these shows. It's a cycle. It's just a sick cycle.
Oh no. Well, if you have never seen Basilisk before or Ninja Scroll, we are going to get into the synopsis before we break down the show for you. But we have to turn it over to longtime friend and listener of the show, Bobby Anthem, for the synopsis of Basilisk. So, Bobby, take it away.
The year is 1614 AD. Two warring ninja clans, each supporting a son of Hidetada Tokugawa as the next shogun, send representatives to fight each other to the death for control, winner take all. The deadly competition between these elite ninja unleashes a centuries-old hatred that threatens to destroy all hope for peace between them for the next millennium.
Awesome. Thank you, Bobby, as always. Dave,
Yeah.
Where are we placing Bobby in the Basilisk universe? And I'm saying this because I don't want this to be...
Is it my turn? No, I can't remember.
No, I don't want this to be competitive. I'm just saying, what if Bobby if there was like a narrator that just sort of gave you the overview of everything? Because let's be very clear, there's a lot that happens.
There's a lot of moving parts, and it all happens very quickly in the matter of like 10 days, which is insane. It took me longer to watch some of these episodes than... we do kind of have a narrator. I was thinking, what if Bobby was either the head of another clan that was like on the outside of this, kind of watching from the outside? I'd like to see him as like the head of a clan.
Okay.
All right. Or like a 21st ninja, maybe. Like somebody on the outside who's like too smart to get all caught up in this family drama. Because it's just like Hatfields and McCoys, or, you know, the Romeos and the Juliets.
The Montagues and Capulets.
Capulets. You think I didn't know? You thought I didn't know. But I sat here reading it in preparation for this podcast.
No, I mean, it definitely is that family drama. And I could see Bobby being sort of, dare I say, he could be the Hattori Hanzo.
He could be.
Of kind of all of this. He could just kind of be like hanging back, very notable.
Hattori hands off, more like.
Oh, yeah, damn. That's good.
I was saving that one.
Were you really just holding on to that one?
It just came up out of nowhere.
That was Dave improvising, and
that was it. And that's all you'll ever get. That's the best I'll ever do.
Well, awesome. Well, let's get into a little bit of Basilisk so that we can uphold our end of the cartoon lawyer bargain that we've made to Charles. We are going to talk about the good, the bad, and the LOL. Does that sound like it's a spaghetti western? 100%, because we pulled it straight from that same idea. We're going to talk a little bit about the good, what we like about Basilisk, and what we found to be very fun about it. We're going to talk about the bad, things that didn't resonate with us, things that we did not necessarily love about it, and we'll make some small critiques. We're also going to talk about the LOLs, or in this instance, there's not a ton of LOLs, no. So we're actually going to maybe introduce a whoa moment, where we're just kind of like, whoa, where something was revealed, or there is maybe something special that happened that kind of took us aback, or that we thought was really cool. So we'll talk a little bit about that. all under the umbrella and understanding that a lot of time, sweat, blood, energy, Monster Energy drinks goes into making an animated piece, especially a series like Basilisk. So just to be respectful of everything that they have here, a lot of really cool things, but we're going to break it down. And as we're doing that, we should note and mention that for this particular episode, we are going to be talking a lot about episode 24, which is called Requiem.
And it's the series finale. Yeah.
Right. And it's the series finale. Also, highest rated episode on IMDb, which has led us in that direction. Dave and I have also done some bonus homework.
Yeah. This is a rough one to just dive into if you haven't watched anything else and you're just kind of like, what is going on in this episode? So, probably a good idea to watch at least some recap episodes. Like episode 10 is a great recap episode for the previous 9 that I wish I had watched first. So check that out if you want a bit of a jump start. Yeah.
Exactly. So we've watched a bunch of bonus episodes for this to kind of fill in some of those gaps because there is a lot that happens. And let's be honest, as Dave mentioned, if you were only watching episode 24, which the entire series is available on Hulu right now, if you only watched that final episode, it would have been like reading the last paragraph or the last chapter of Romeo and Juliet.
Which is what I did. And it's great.
That's the only way that I prepare for this.
Yeah, it's all clear to me now.
We're going to be talking about a little bit more, but we're going to be focusing on what we had for episode 24 for Requiem. So Dave, to kick us off in terms of the good, what stood out to you? What were you enjoying about Basilisk? Other than just the name being cool.
I still don't understand Basilisk, right? So I don't get it. It's not there's no Harry Potter nonsense here. It's well before and after that. I don't really know what the name's about, but I dig pretty much everything else about this anime. I like the idea that it's kind of like a heightened Romeo and Juliet story with, like Charles mentioned, ninjas, insane powers, and it's just super gory and bloody, and it's definitely very mature, and you just have almost constant battles. Now, some of them are philosophical, and some of them, most of them, are just straight up gory, violent, physical battles that you get to see them play out. So if that appeals to you, then yeah, you're probably going to like this show. So luckily it appealed to me. And that's one of the things that I thought was pretty good about it. But like you mentioned that, we've got some comparisons to other things. So what about you? What's like a high level for you?
I'm going to start almost like at the very, very beginning of this episode with even just the intro, which I want to almost kind of break into 3 separate pieces. Sure. One is the Funimation intro.
Right.
Nothing says it's time to watch anime like getting the Funimation intro. For me, it cued me right in.
Nothing says it's time for you Westerners to watch this anime we licensed from Japan.
Yep.
Like the Funimation intro. And I'm not knocking them. I've watched a ton of Funimation over the last, 25 years, and I continue to do so. It's just, they do kind of get that stigma of like, licensing the Japanese anime and bringing them over. Thankfully, in recent years, between them and Crunchyroll, they've been able to kind of like bring simulcasts so we can all watch them together more or less, which has been great.
And you think about it too, during that point where they weren't able to simulcast, right. I feel like in many cases, Funimation was the only way that we were able to get accessibility to a lot of those licensing IPs that they have that are, in Japan and China and all throughout Asia. So awesome. So thanks, Funimation.
We should mention, though, too, that we watched the subtitled version because that's, to my mind, the only thing that's available on Hulu. So Correct. It wasn't even, again, they get a knock sometimes for their like dubs. It wasn't even a Funimation dub. It was just they were licensed and they brought them over. And we watched pretty much the original version with, I don't think, anything edited or changed from the original. Just with that Funimation stamp on the beginning.
Yeah, I enjoy it. Yeah. We get a little, like, right after the Funimation, we get sort of like a very quick story with a snake, which is maybe the basilisk that's in question.
I guess, but I feel like that's only half the story.
Yeah. And the other half being a hawk. And them kind of locked in this, again, as Dave has mentioned, this is a very violent, very gory anime. So they're sort of locked in this battle. It appears like the hawk has won, but at the same time, the basilisk has basically is consuming the head of the hawk, and the hawk is biting the basilisk in half. So, hey, foreshadowing.
Yeah, a little bit.
Every
episode you get this, by the way. It's like the beginning of the theme song. So just in case you forget from episode to episode, that's what's going on.
In some cases, I think these are very, like, I've made mention about this before in intros. it's great sometimes when you do this, maybe in those first 9 up to that mid-season break or recap episode that anime is classically known for. That's fine. But then moving forward, maybe you kind of ditch it, because at that point you think if you're, going into the end of the season, you probably have that context. This is like, nope, we're going to remind you every single time.
Even up to the last episode. I think that's because this kind of came from that era still. This was only 2005, but still a while ago, where it was just, they made the theme song in the intro. That stayed the same throughout the entire series. It wasn't until later, Naruto is one of the ones that's great for this. Every arc, they have a different theme song. They have a different intro. They have visuals that will kind of tell you what's going to happen in the arc or the season that's coming up. This is the same block, the same music, the same animation, the same everything for 24 episodes. And it's not a bad thing. It's just saying it's very consistent, because they made the theme song and intro, and then they blocked off whatever the other 22 minutes were, or whatever, for their production run through scripts and storyboards and all that stuff too. So you're starting to see sort of like the nuts and bolts of the production with stuff like that. For better or worse.
A little bit maybe of the cookie cutterness of how
definitely.
These things were blocked out.
Sure.
And that's fine.
Yeah, it's fine.
It's funny because you say 2005, there were a lot of Funimation anime that kind of came out around that time. Do you know some other ones just off the top of your head,
Off the top
Dave?
of my head now, because that was sort of like leaving, post-college, getting into other stuff. So no, not sitting around in the dorm watching Adult Swim or whatever. So no.
This is where we had a lot of Samurai Champloo.
Sure.
Eureka 7. So, I mean, just sort of some of that Trinity Blood, I remember, is one that I had watched back in that day. So there were a lot of things that were coming out around that time, that were being brought over thanks to Funimation to an American audience for the first time, that I remember from that period. So it's crazy to think about sort of what some of those contemporaries were during that period. And that this is something that came after. I know probably a lot of people who are my age and our age, Dave, watched, so much anime thanks to Adult Swim. Yeah. And sort of like those late night runs where they would have, and it would be like,
definitely.
Yeah, and Toonami. And so you think about like Cowboy Bebop came out before this. You think like Trigun came out before this. So there's tons and tons of stuff. So this is very interesting, because we then are greeted after the reminder of how the nuts and the bolts and the cookie cutter is going to work with a rockin' intro theme song.
That was good, man.
Yeah.
Anytime you get those guitar riffs in there with a little bit of rock flute, I'm down.
Yeah, flute making a comeback, seeing it every once in a while,
yeah.
loving it
in
Not
2005.
bad. Was it popular in 2005?
I guess it must have been. When did Anchorman come out with the jazz rock flute?
Oh God, I have no idea.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like that was, I guess maybe mid to late 2000s.
Something like that, yeah.
No idea.
But it works for the show. They do a good job of it. This is kind of like the dedicated, I wish more kind of, Western American cartoons and animated series did stuff like this. And they're getting to now, but I feel like we're behind the trend where you actually have like a solid standalone dedicated animation sequence like this.
Right. And it's very fun too, because one of the things that we'll talk about in a little bit is sort of the rolling cast of characters.
Yeah.
And so you do get a very nice kind of preview of some of the characters. In fact, all of the characters that we are going to see throughout the entire series,
like
all 24 episodes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's expansive. And the challenging thing is that you're not getting any name or title card for anybody. They're all doing something fun and exciting, and you just sort of get maybe like a little flash of some of their powers.
Or they're just
and
standing there looking cool, and some of them look exactly like other ones, and you're just kind of like, well, wait a minute, who are you again? Which one were you?
Oh yeah, there are a couple characters that I got confused every once in a while, and it was because one had slightly darker hair and one had slightly lighter hair,
or one just has like a mean expression, and one is more like friendly. That's it. Like that's the only difference in their character design. Is like one like narrows his eyes at you, and the other one's just big puppy dog eyes. That's it.
Yeah.
Good luck.
And that's fine.
That's fine. The good news is they'll start killing each other off soon enough anyway, so there's not that many to remember.
If you're keeping score, just get a 10 by 10 board, write a bunch of names down, or just
numbers,
attributes,
even.
like big puppy dog eyes, kind of like very square staring at you eyes, and then just systematically just begin to kind of put red check X's through everything. That's how this show is going to proceed.
Yeah.
It is 24 episodes of a killing spree.
Pretty much, yeah. Which is, it's interesting because you don't think of that when you think of Romeo and Juliet normally, but there are other anime that have done this as well. They set up kind of tournament style, or they set up, you could even think of things like Bloodsport. It's just tournament kind of fighting, but this has a lot more kind of narrative structure to it than just a fighting contest. There's a lot more going on here.
Why are we conditioned to love this? And I don't say this, just like in general, like everybody is conditioned, but I'd say
me and you
myself, specifically,
yeah,
me and you. Like I'm going to talk for our perspective. Sure. Like I don't want to put words in anybody else's mouth, but I know ours. I grew up. Yeah, except ours. Well, because we can chat about it. Everybody listening is like, you can't hear us, dum-dum. Like, don't worry about it.
Trust me, it doesn't stop them from trying.
Yeah, but I grew up in arcade culture, going to arcades every Saturday morning, Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter 2, Street Fighter 2 Turbo,
Karate
all
Kid.
Of these, all of these fighting games, Bloodsport, as you mentioned, different things that were, basically like 1v1.
Even WWF.
Characters. Right.
Before it was WWE,
Exactly. So, just that process of fighting games, even to the point where I've made mention to Dave, something I've been watching aside from this show has been the Netflix animated series Baki, which is just tournament fighting. Yeah. The entire third season is nothing but tournament fighting.
But see, I think that's part of your answer right there. It is a simple formula. You don't really need anything else in there. You say a bunch of elite, Street Fighter. I don't know if we mentioned it or not, but like you bring in a bunch of elite fighters from a location. Doesn't matter where it is. If it's Dragon Ball does the same thing. People want to watch it because it's just like a bunch of high level fighters going after each other with the ultimate goal of either winning, surviving, or just beating everybody else just to prove that you can. It's very simple and it's very kind of like primal. And the cool thing is, even if you root for some people and you root against other people, you still want to see everybody kind of do their best and put their best effort on display because you want to see how powerful everybody is, how cool the moves are, what kind of weapons you're bringing, what kind of skills you have. That's the fun part. And then you can get caught up in the drama and stuff, but it's normally secondary. This show flips that a little bit.
Right. It's funny that you mentioned that, and I would agree. I think maybe one of the more recent movies that I've watched where it has been somebody at the top of their game in a very simple kind of like versus setting has been the John Wick movies.
Yeah, exactly.
And every time that happens, you're like, oh, I'm watching somebody who's the best at what they do.
That's like a 1v all tournament. Yeah, which is
right.
Unusual. I mean, that goes back to like even the Bruce Lee movies and stuff too. I can't remember which one it was, but where he's kind of climbing that tower at the end and fighting somebody on every level. I think that was the unfinished one. That the plan was to go up that like pagoda and like fight everybody on every level and have like a mini boss each level. But for obvious reasons, they didn't quite ever finish that movie unless I'm getting them confused. But it's just to say, going back over the last, you could look through human history. We've always been fascinated with like gladiatorial combat and tournament style fighting and the winnowing down of losers and winners and eventually getting to one ultimate winner. I think it's a pretty primal thing. I mean, look at literally any sports, any sporting event ever. It's pretty much that.
And I say all this recognizing that maybe a month ago they had, it was online, I think it's through 36 Chambers or 36 Cinema. They did the Mystery of Chess Boxing, which is like a classic martial arts fighting movie. It's the first time that they ever referenced the Ghostface Killer, which obviously there's a lot of inspiration for the Wu-Tang Clan. Right. And so, but RZA from the Wu-Tang Clan was actually there talking about it and talking about all of the martial arts and the scenes and everything that went into it, because it wasn't a studio film. It was actually an independent film. And so just to look at the different sequences and everything and kind of, again, as we've mentioned, sort of break down the mechanics and the nuts and bolts of how some of these things work. I think you're right. I think, it's very simple in terms of its formula. You get it. And you get to see somebody who's at the peak or the pinnacle of whatever that martial arts or whatever that fighting style is perform. And there are surprises,
I think,
in terms of what we can do in the human body.
Definitely. Or not in the case of Basilisk, because it's like there's some weird backstory that's never really explained in the anime. I think it comes to the front more in the book. But there's like generations of inbreeding to kind of highlight and emphasize certain traits, which make all these people just like they're insane. Without getting into any kind of like nicknames or whatever for them, they're just completely insane. Their power sets are bizarre, but they're super fun to watch. It reminded me of old school Mortal Kombat, but back then we didn't need a story wrapped around that. They were just like, it's a tournament featuring fighters from like different realms. We're like, cool, fine. I'll just pick whoever I want and just
quarters.
Yeah, see what I can do. But then, I just played MK11, and now it's more like a story of realm versus realm, or good versus evil, or mortal versus god, or they've kind of figured out that they need a story to keep that kind of idea going.
You got to be Chronicus.
You just got to do it. You just got to shatter that hourglass.
Yeah,
yep,
that's it.
That's all you got to do.
We bring up, and we're talking about all of this. One of the things that I really enjoyed about this are these ninja powers, these ninpo that they have that are in this. These, in many cases, were holy crap moments for me. They're so much fun to watch.
But they were also confusing because I've seen some of them before. And then again, I was like, wait, am I still watching the right thing?
Yeah. We'll chat about that a little bit more. But we bring all this up because there are just really cool things that you see in continuing either comparative powers or new powers that are brought up that are introduced that are very fun to watch.
Did you have a favorite or a couple favorites from the group? Or one that you would like to have, or one that you would absolutely hate to fight against?
I'd hate to fight against Tenzin.
Now refresh myself and literally everyone else listening for who Tenzin is.
He has a regeneration, and he's the immortal ninja, and it's very. He's a very interesting character. He's an Iga ninja from their clan, and he is very deadly. And there's a bunch of really kind of what the heck is actually going on moments in this,
which is real tough to pick up on if you've only watched the finale.
Yep. And even in the finale, there is a moment where it's straight body horror. And if you've been listening for any period of time, The Thing. John Carpenter's The Thing, body horror stuff like that, I'm 100% on board. And they do a great job of introducing and bringing that into this show in seemingly the last couple seconds of it. So it's just very weird.
I'm going to have to ask what that was about because I don't remember that from the finale. Maybe I watched the wrong thing.
He has that symbiote that is in him that it looks like a little like smiling face.
Oh, a little
and whenever he gets
bud.
Yeah, whenever he gets cut or he gets injured, it goes under his skin and kind of like bites and eats at where the wound is and sort of heals him from the inside. So he can be impaled, he can be stabbed, his head can get cut off. Yeah. And in the beheading portion of this, when they put the head back onto the body and the little face just kind of like shows up for a snack on the neck, there's a moment where Oboro looks directly at him and uses her power, which neutralizes Ninpo.
She's got the mystic eyes.
And she uses mystic eyes on him, and the symbiote just kind of, instead of forming everything and healing his cut on his neck, the symbiote just like takes over his neck and begins to kind of like talk. Like it looks like a weird scarecrow inside of somebody's neck talking. It reminded me a little bit of like a Clayface character from Batman animated series.
Yeah.
And it looked gross, but it was very cool and unexpected.
I will say
and horrifying.
that happens, I believe, before the finale. But it's like probably
maybe that happens in the second to last episode.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, because 24 is a little more focused on our two kind of main characters, because literally everyone else has pretty much been killed at this point. Spoiler alert for this 15-year-old show, 24th episode. But I actually really like the power sets of these two characters. So our Romeo and Juliet, we have Gennosuke and Oboro. And they have their powers. They're pretty powerful, but they're not showy. They're not like, they're not throwing fireballs. They're not super stretchy and bendy. They're not, blowing anybody away at any given time. But their power sets are kind of like focused within their eyes. So Gennosuke has been trained by other ninja, and he has the dojutsu, which can reverse kind of any malicious intent of anyone he's looking at. So if somebody was trying to kill him and they were coming at him, you could just kind of like look at them and they would turn their blades or whatever on themselves. So he always ends up kind of like untouched with a lot of dead people around him, having never really had to do anything. Now, he's also very accomplished as like a swordsman and all kinds of other stuff because he can't rely on just his eyes, for good reason, because he's blinded multiple times in this series itself over the 24 episodes.
Yikes.
And then we mentioned Oboro's eyes too, but they essentially just neutralize anybody else's power. So if she looks at you, whatever your power was is neutralized. So those two together I find really interesting from a narrative perspective, because there's to me, a really interesting standoff between the two of them at the very, very end that has a lot of interesting kind of like philosophical meat to chew on based on their eyes, if they can see, if they choose to use their powers, what their powers are. There's some neat stuff there.
And you know, as you're saying this, like the story point to understand is that at the very end, Oboro decides
she has... real quick, do we need to explain Romeo and Juliet to anybody?
I mean, spoiler alert.
You want to sum it up real quick?
Yeah. Two warring houses that don't like each other.
Yeah.
Two star-crossed lovers.
Okay.
Who want to get together.
They love each other.
And are pining for each other. Finally, they're able to be kind of brought together, and in the final kind of throes and moments, end up. Well, I think if you're reading Romeo and Juliet, Romeo is grieving because he thinks that Juliet is dead, and so he stabs himself. And Juliet then is not really dead. She's just
pretending.
Yeah, she's just kind of pretending. She's taken like an elixir.
Yeah, she took too much NyQuil. And, yeah.
Who hasn't? So she wakes up with a little bit of NyQuil head, and she is like, "Oh no, what's happened to my love?" And then she kills herself. So it's a very tragic story.
It's a roughie,
right? So in this instance, regarding sort of the eyes and how those particular gazes and the powers that they hold, in this moment, Oboro has kind of cried over top of Gennosuke, and he was previously like spat in the eye. One of the other opponents spat in his eye and kind of like sealed his eyes. So right.
For days or however long, his eyes were like sealed up and like crusted over. He had really bad pink eye, essentially. Couldn't see anything, couldn't use his eyes, had to fight blind, all that good stuff. Conjunctivitis, yeah. Special power conjunctivitis.
Right. So he wasn't able to see, and in these final moments, Oboro has turned the blade on herself, and she has taken her life. And then you see Gennosuke, like, he's been mortally and like critically injured in a previous sword fight with Tenzin. In this moment, he sees that like his love is in the process of dying. Maybe he could have reversed that malicious intent, but he didn't have the use of his eyes until those final moments where he basically walks into a river with Oboro, and they both kind of collapse. And
he takes the same blade and offs himself too. Yeah.
Yeah.
The interesting, all that is super
it felt like it was redundant. Like
he's just like, well, let's just make sure. I don't know that I want to,
Yeah.
There's a lot of interesting stuff going on there. So these two were the last of the 20 ninja who were all vying against each other for control of the land, essentially, and to become the next shogun. Mm-hmm. So that's the star-crossed part. These two don't want to fight each other. They also don't really want to take over as shogun. They don't want to be in charge of these crazies, these completely insane houses.
Who would?
They don't really want to do it, and then they're forced to have to either like kill each other or to their own kind of fates. They each take their own lives. So a number of interesting things. So Oboro takes her own life, but also kind of not really heals, but kind of cures Gennosuke's eyes. If she would have had the mystic eyes, if he used his eyes, there's a lot of interesting kind of interplays there. Like you said, he could have used his power to change her intent, forcing her to try to kill him. But if she had her eyes going, that would have neutralized his power to begin with. So you would be left with this philosophical question of like, well, who was using whose power against each other, and who was acting of their own accord, and who was being coerced or whatever. But because Gennosuke is blinded, that takes all that out of the equation. So you're left with just this understanding that she sacrificed herself, and then he sacrificed himself because neither of them wanted to deal with any of this garbage. They both just wanted to be together. There's a quote he has that says, "A spirit split in two will join together." And that's from throughout the episodes. There's flashback scenes to them that are really nice. They're always talking about being together with each other. It just wasn't fated to be. So
Right.
I think he writes on the scroll. He's basically like, Oboro, she's the last one to survive, so Shogunate stays with or passes to the Iga family. And then he just kind of offs himself too. So
Right.
interesting stuff there.
And he just throws it up into the air, and
Take it, Hawk.
Silverhawk just grabs it. And
Hawk.
perfect.
Love it.
Yeah, and it's crazy to think that these two, the Kouga and the Iga had been fighting, and then they had brokered a peace treaty, and
that was within their lifetimes too, because I remember that when they were younger. Yeah,
and Gennosuke had wanted to build and continue that peace by marrying Oboro to secure that.
Basically,
and then,
the only normals left in these families. Yeah. Let's just secure the normals while these other nut jobs just run free.
And then, when there is peace in sight, in clear sight, because everybody's kind of on board with the direction that they're going. They're like, you know what? Wow, Dave, how do you feel about a 10 versus 10 ninja battle?
Feel real good. Feel real good about killing off most of my heirs. That's one thing I don't really understand about this. And maybe I'd have to watch the whole thing again, but the original Shogun didn't die. He just kind of retired. So this whole thing started with two of his grandsons were leaders of their separate clans and their houses. They all started fighting against each other, but he was the one that kind of instigated it and started the whole thing, starting with their heads of house, who were also star-crossed lovers, if we can kind of read between the lines here.
Yep.
So what the heck is going on in this world, in this original story?
I mean, I think if anything, and you're talking about Danjo and Ogen, who are in the first episode, and you're kind of, they're the ones that are kind of brokering this challenge. Right. And I want to think ultimately it's the idea of sort of, time being cyclic, or sort of, people not learning their lesson from generation to generation. And Danjo and Ogen, I think it's the very end of episode 1, are kind of talking about the fact that, this could have been us. Like, we could have been happy and it just wasn't in our stars. And in that moment, Danjo spits a needle and it begins to kill Ogen. And then in Ogen's final breath, she takes one of the needles out of her and impales Danjo, and they both die next to this. And so the entire...
But they also die, I don't know if you saw this, but they also die and then float with each other down the river.
Yeah,
and then later on, actually this was in episode 10, they do a recap of it. And there's sort of one of the other, it's, what's his name? Kiyohachiro, which is Hattori Hanzo's kind of adopted son. Mm-hmm. He is reporting back to the Shogun and was just like, well, I saw where their bodies were after they killed each other, and I just decided to let them be because they were just peacefully drifting down the river in each other's arms, even though they had just straight murdered each other. So yeah, to your point, I think it's a cyclical nature and that we really don't learn from our previous mistakes.
And if you were thinking to yourself, Sean, I feel like there's a literary technique that we've already named for this. Maybe it's called foreshadowing. Oh my gosh, you are so astute, and you nailed that idea right on the head, because that's exactly what it is. That's how we end up seeing Oboro and Gennosuke in each other's arms in the water, floating down. I just, it's an interesting bookend to the whole story to see that not only did Danjo and Ogen not get to have this great life, but at least they got to grow and have full lives. And their family, they essentially
were 1,000 years old by the time they died. Yeah.
They essentially cursed them to have to repeat their exact mistakes for no reason.
That's the one thing that kind of stuck with me. It was just kind of I don't know. I didn't really get the reason behind it. But it was a cool story to watch. Other than that, I do like that we get a little button at the end, post-credit scene before the Marvel Universe.
Please tell me about this, because this little stinger is great.
It's good. So maybe you have a different take on it than I do. But again, it's Kiyohachiro, who I just mentioned, son of Hattori Hanzo. He's basically just been kind of on the outside, sometimes helping out, sometimes just keeping track of everybody, just creeping around. Not really getting super involved, but keeping an eye on everybody and reporting back to the heads of the shogunate. He takes the flute from Gennosuke, which Oboro had, so she had his flute. He takes that and kind of takes care of it. And there's this kind of narration as he's walking through town and the credits are rolling that there's a new time of peace and everything has kind of calmed down now that the 10-day ninja war is over. he keeps the flute and he kind of pays homage to both of them. He's like the one person who will remember both of their sacrifices and what they did to, quote, bring about the peace, which is definitely an interesting way to bring about peace rather than, I don't know, just live together and unite the two clans, but whatever. So he's kind of the one who remembers them, pays his respects to them over the river that they float down, essentially, and then just kind of walks on into another peaceful era until, they make a sequel 10 years later and it's not as good and we pretend it doesn't exist.
I feel as if Charles has some opinions about...
Charles has opinions.
Charles has opinions about that.
Maybe we'll watch that for a future episode. Maybe we'll dip it, Charles.
Possibly.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've talked a bunch about some of the good things.
Yeah.
Anything else that you want to before we kind of transition into some of the bad?
I don't think so. Like, if you like ninjas, if you like some of the stuff we're going to talk about in a second, and if you like Romeo and Juliet, like, you'll find a lot to like in Basilisk. I think it may be... I think we're good. I think I can get into the bad section.
Wow, I felt like you were just you were ready to like review it right then and there, Dave.
No, I was going to mention something that I didn't particularly like, but I was waiting for an official transition.
Okay, no. Let's. I think we are squarely in the bad.
Yeah.
Go on. What's up?
A little long. There were times where I felt a little filler,
Yeah.
There's a little filler here and there. The recap episode was fine. If you hadn't watched the previous 9, which I did. But if you want to jump straight to 10, they'll tell you everything you need to know. A little bit of filler here and there. The flashback stuff I didn't mind too much. It kind of fills in the story of where these families came from and why they're at each other's throats and why these two have been betrothed and actually do love each other. So there's some nice stuff there, but a little long. Maybe it's just the attention span these days and I don't have it, but they could have condensed it a little bit. How about you?
I feel in some cases the same way, but it's hard because I'm in the middle on this one.
Okay.
I want to strike a balance between Ninja Scroll, which was very fun,
Sure,
and I really enjoyed it, but there were parts of it where I was like, I'd love a little bit more story, or
right.
some of the 8 devils of Kimon, I'd love to know a little bit more because we only get to see them for a very, very limited amount of time.
For a fight, and that's it. Yeah.
And so, there are particular characters and skills that you get a chance to see over a couple episodes with some of these characters, and I enjoyed that. Is it 24 episodes worth that I need? Especially really a 3-part ending, which time-wise is maybe an hour. Yeah, I'm willing to invest the time to be able to watch it. I mean, I have to, Charles, cartoon lawyers, So I needed that context and I needed to kind of understand how that story properly ended and sort of what those motivators were. Will I go back and watch the other, maybe 18 episodes that I haven't watched? Who knows? Spoiler alert, I probably will because I want to see some cool ninja battles.
And that's the thing. It's like that middle ground is like they're cool standalone battles, sometimes weirdly out of context. Sometimes they just show up places that you're just like, where are we? What's happening? Oh, we're fighting? Okay, cool. Sometimes it doesn't matter. Sometimes it's just a group of them get together and they're ambushed, or there's just 2 of them in the woods and they're fighting one-on-one. But a lot of it is just kind of like there's almost too many characters to really know what's going on at any given time unless you watch it multiple times. So I don't know. Not for me to probably go through and watch it all again or even reinvest in the few episodes that I missed, but it just feels a little stretched. I do like the idea that when they fight, it's not necessarily the last time you'll see that character. You get a taste of what they can do, and then maybe they have a rematch, which is kind of cool too. But sometimes the same characters kind of clash over and over again, and I'm just kind of like, all right, let's move on. Rarely do they get the chance to actually like augment each other's powers too, which I feel like was a missed opportunity. They do work together sometimes, but for the most part, it's kind of mano-a-mano. They don't really team up to go house against house. It's always ninja versus ninja.
Yeah, and in some cases, very, very early on, I think within like the first 3 or 4 episodes, it's like 5 versus 1.
Yeah. I think it's what the Igas who are really ganging up on the Kouga, and I may have that flipped because one house knows that this kind of tournament is for control of the land, and the other house doesn't know. The other house doesn't even know that the peace pact has been nullified until about halfway through the series. Yeah. So they don't find out until, 10, 12 episodes in that like, oh, we're actually in like a battle to the death for something important. So maybe we should get our acts in gear.
And it is the Iga that kind of take the scroll that sort of announces everything about the tournament. So the Kouga have no idea that this is coming. All they know is that they are getting attacked and hit hard.
Yeah.
So I'll say this. one of the things that obviously, as I mentioned earlier, it's impossible not to draw the comparison to Ninja Scroll.
Yeah, impossible.
And I don't want to belabor this point, but there are even specific characters from Ninja Scroll, even just the names, which I'm sure are common names and historical names that were probably either Iga or Kouga ninjas back in the day.
Well, they're also both adaptations of Fûtarô Yamada's work too.
Correct.
So they do have the same kind of source material. It's just kind of weird that one happened, 12 years before the other, and yet it feels like it's part of the same world.
Yeah. And that's a challenge, is to feel like it is the part of the same world. A lot of, I want to say, in some cases, some of, if Ninja Scroll came out in 1993, it felt very of the time, and it was very impressive, for that period of time and for anime just in general. Watching this in 2005, it obviously it looks like it's been updated a little bit more from 2005. I want to say even, maybe the Ninja Kagero from Ninja Scroll, very angular, kind of in sort of like her feminine jawline.
Yes.
She's a very strong character and she's awesome. But just she's a very distinct style. When you see the 2005 Basilisk version of women, they're a little bit more fan servicey in some case.
Definitely.
Which is totally fine. And it's understood. I only bring that up to kind of illustrate a little bit of the difference. But there are a lot of elements that kind of can make the style comparison impossible not to make between the two, between Basilisk and Ninja Scroll, as well as also, you see, I mentioned, Kagero. There is a character that is in this who is even noted as being a central character in Ninja Scroll, who was inspired, this particular character, who actually is able to poison enemies through sexual contact and has the exact same power in Basilisk. So, we even get a character named Jubei, who's very fun, and we'll talk a little bit about shortly. So you see all these different characters, and it's impossible, if you have enjoyed and watched Ninja Scroll previously, it's impossible to kind of shake that because those are enormous boots to fill.
And I will say too, now that we're like an hour into the discussion, if you're looking into checking this out, you should be aware that there's obviously a lot of violence, there's a lot of blood, there's a lot of gore, but it's also a very like kind of sexually abusive series. So there's a lot of kind of sexual abuse that happens. There's rape that happens. I don't particularly like, rape as a plot point in a lot of things. I don't recall that from Romeo and Juliet, but maybe I haven't read it more recently. So I don't know. Maybe that's in the subtext Shakespeare and I missed out on it when I was in like 6th grade. I don't know. But, Ninja Scroll had that too. Ninja Scroll had characters who were pretty rapey and perverted, but they also had the female characters who could flip that. I think even our hero character uses a power. I forget how she did it, but there was a way to kind of like subvert that and like flip the power balance so that they were still technically like victims. They were still abused, but they found a way to kind of gain control and gain power out of that. And that does happen with some of our female characters here.
Yes.
But for other ones, it does not. It's just straight up sexual assault and rape, and it's repeated. Sometimes the same people, the same perpetrators, and the same victims. And that's not great. So 2005, there's a lot to learn from 2020. But again, I think that probably goes back to, I'm assuming, and I haven't read it, I think it might go back to the source material. But it's also, that fan service line is a tough one, man. I've watched a lot of anime where the fan service is quote unquote fine, but it's still kind of like, for me, it's just kind of tired. Like I don't need it for the story. And then it crosses a line sometimes where it's just like, oh, okay, now you're just sort of, you're now in like wish fulfillment territory where maybe it's just a cultural thing between the West and the East. I don't know. But again, in the year 2020, a lot of that is not super acceptable anymore. So if you're thinking about checking it out, just be aware that that's going to be in there, and it's going to be quite a bit.
Just understand that there are a bunch of trigger warnings that are in this.
Pretty much, this is trigger warning the anime.
So it's definitely there, and I agree with you. Like having rape as a plot point is not great.
Yeah, there are other ways to tell us, like, oh, that's the bad guy. We got it.
Yeah.
But this is, it's an
you mean the guy
way.
who's murdered an entire village with a sword?
Well, when we're watching everybody murder everybody else, sometimes, it might get a little difficult to tell the bad guys from the not so bad guys, but yeah.
Interesting.
Well, luckily there are some just like straight up fun, ridiculous moments too.
Right. That being said, would you like to transition into some of those fun and ridiculous moments?
Sure would. All the stuff we've talked about happens in only 10 days.
Yeah.
So all 20 of these ninja, they start a war, they attack each other, they basically kill all of each other, and then the last two are left standing, and they Romeo and Juliet themselves, and the war's over in 10 days.
Right.
I guess they were all pretty close to each other. There wasn't a whole lot of moving around. They didn't have to like go across the country and gather their family together. They were all kind of there. So yeah, 10 days and only two were left standing, and then 0. So
Right.
that's fun.
Oh man. I obviously, because we, just some of the sexual abuse takes place in, I think, episode 22 and a little bit in 23.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Leading up to the finale. And so there are no LOLs for me in this. But as we mentioned, I guess we're going to kind of do a fun little pivot on this for Charles and say that there are some whoa moments.
I got a couple minor LOLs, and they really have nothing to do with the show. But one is, if you're watching this on Hulu and you haven't paid the like $50 a month or whatever it is to not have ads, sometimes ridiculous ads will pop up, and sometimes their like editing isn't quite right. So you'll be watching a scene play out, and then like a Levi's jeans commercial or something will come on, and they'll be playing like the Freedom song or whatever as awful things are happening on the screen, and it's just kind of like this weird non sequitur overlap that can be funny. It has nothing to do with the show itself. The one other thing that made me laugh at the very, very end, that metal riff, that guitar, that hard rock guitar from the theme song comes out of nowhere to signify that it's the end of the series, because it's just blue sky, there's a hawk soaring before the credits even start rolling. That guitar just starts wailing, man. You're like, all right, I guess we're done. And that made me laugh.
Yeah.
What made you whoa?
Yeah. So, I mean, thank you for your LOLs.
Sure.
The woes that I had were just sort of a lot of the reveals that we had for the ninja powers that take place. And so there is Kazamachi, who has the ability to be able to spit, and that can like get solidified. And, and the way that they describe
that's the more important point.
Phlegm. He spits
sticky phlegm.
That to me was sort of like oh man, kind of a cool reveal to sort of see how he was able to use and leverage that. His character design is very similar to, again, another ninja that's in Ninja Scroll. It doesn't matter. He's kind of a very beastly looking character. Very fun. A whoa moment for me, I think one of maybe the biggest ones was the Jubei character that is in this, because Jubei is bananas in this. Why is he bananas? Because
he's
you
shaped
might
like
say,
a banana.
Well, his abilities is that he has a snake physiology, and he doesn't have any arms or legs.
Nope.
He is able to, his like main mode of transportation is that he has like this breastplate that has like these little like feelers that can move.
They're
back
like
and
little
forth.
metal plates that just like flip up and down. So if he's laying on the ground, like stomach down, they just
Like
zip along. Little
like
millipede legs.
When that happened, I just went, "Oh my god, what are we watching?"
He was so fast too.
Sold.
He was so fast.
This.
I did love when he comes up against another ninja and he was holding a scroll in his mouth at the time, and he's like, "Look, bud, you're either gonna have to drop that. You're gonna have to drop that scroll if you want to use your like snake spear tongue that's in your mouth." So essentially, like,
blade, the
hidden blade. So essentially saying that like these guys know each other. It's not like they're coming up against each other for the first time. So they're pretty aware of what's going on. Yeah.
That character was Tenzin.
Right.
That in the previous episode, he had impaled him and left him for dead.
Right.
So Tenzin was able to, because of that little symbiote, come back, which again is another like whoa moment for me, because in that moment you think, okay, this guy's obviously immortal, or how is
Something's
he doing this?
on,
Or there's some cool power that we're about to find out about, but just the Jubei hidden blade inside of his mouth. I guess there was an LOL. This will be my LOL.
LOL whoa.
For this to kind of round out this LOL portion for myself, is that when he takes out the blade and stabs and like impales Tenzin, he then just goes, "Oh, I gotta put this away so that nobody else finds out about my technique." So he begins to swallow the sword, and he gets it all the way down, and like you see it, it's extended, it's graphic of like it moving down his neck because it's a dagger
sword, just like in his snake.
And then
body.
he gets it in there, and then he just burps. Just like it was ridiculous.
You swallow a lot of air when you're swallowing swords.
But of course, like you're gonna do that, and because of that air, Dave, you're gonna let that little burp out. So
there was a lot
so
of kind of
weird.
like just potty humor and just kind of like gross out humor with like what was his name?
Oh, you talk about Josuke?
I was gonna say Josuke, but then I was like, hold on, is that is that JoJo's Bizarre Adventure? But no, Josuke and any of his battles, which again they get into the pervy zone, and it's hard to really enjoy any of these characters because they get creepy at one point. But yeah, I enjoyed that.
Can't be as creepy as Azuki, who's got the flexible, like bendable body that just expands all the time.
Oh, old One Piece, old Monkey D. Luffy,
old Luffy,
old Luffy,
yeah,
old Spider-Head Luffy,
old Summer Squash Head Luffy,
yep.
Perfect.
Yep. Now, is he the one also when he gets like dehydrated, he just turns into like a little fetus creature who needs water, or is that a different guy?
That's the guy with the bad skin.
Oh, that's like the half water
Amayo.
guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
This show is so weird, you guys.
Yeah, he dissolves. He like dissolves into a smaller person.
Just a head.
Yeah. Just becomes like he looks like a yokai.
Yeah, basically.
Just
I will say one of my woe moments was maybe when my dude came out the wall and just like was the wall. He's just one with wall.
Right.
That's fun.
One with wall.
All of them have interesting powers. It was a little hard for me to keep them straight.
Right. And it's hard. I want to say thanks to fandom.com for having an actual visual guide of all the characters. I ended up using and leveraging that throughout a majority of the watch
and this podcast
for the 6 or 7 episodes that I saw.
Yeah.
I think that is my LOLs. Dave, are you good?
I'm good. There's not a lot of laughs to be found in this show.
Not a lot of laughs. Not a lot of laughs, gang.
And I will say, too, it's a well-produced show, so there's not a lot of gaffes either. There's not a lot of, like, quote-unquote, like, jank stuff that we usually like to poke at and laugh at. There's nothing like that there. It's really well-produced.
Right. Well, we're now at the point where we can give our recommendations. So for any newer returning listeners, we can recommend a cartoon and we can say, yeah, absolutely, this is a good use of your time. Check it out. Get into it. We can also say that we don't recommend a cartoon. And in that instance, we can tell you exactly why and maybe make a recommendation on something that you would enjoy even more. If we don't recommend a cartoon, we can go one step further and we can put this into the Who Framed Roger Rabbit style dip. Yep, the dip. It erases it from the annals of cartoon history, and we'll never really talk about it on this show again unless it is to ridicule it, which we have done. I think we've only done it like 5 or 6 times. We've actually
ridicule, sure, yeah.
I mean, we ridicule a lot of stuff.
That's the
gang.
job.
If you're listening, and this is what 277 or 278.
Yeah.
Yeah. At this point, if you don't know that we're ridiculing stuff, we're going for 365 episodes of just nothing but ridicule.
Yeah.
So fun. Dave.
Yeah.
Yeah. Basilisk.
Mm-hmm.
How you feeling, friend?
For Charles?
Yeah.
I feel
Michigan.
Pretty good. I would say if you're a fan of Ninja Scroll, and like Sean said, you want kind of a longer version, or you want a series version. If you're a fan of Romeo and Juliet and always thought to yourself, hey, this needed ninjas and some mature content and a lot of weird supernatural powers, this is up your alley. I will just say again with that trigger warning of, a lot of sexual abuse and not so great stuff in this day and age. So if you're aware of that and can handle that and are okay with that, yeah, check it out. Basilisk it's a solid series. It's a standalone. I don't think you need to watch that sequel. I don't know. I haven't seen it. But this 24 episode chunk is a good, solid story with a bunch of crazy stuff, really good action, quality animation from Gonzo, and a good example of kind of early to mid 2000s anime that came over from Japan and was kind of like exposed to Western audiences. So yeah, I'd say seek it out. How about you?
I'm in the same boat. I almost for the identical reasons. If you watched Ninja Scroll and thought to yourself, I want to see more than just these one battles with these devils of Kimon.
Right.
Yeah, Basilisk, 100%. Why wouldn't you want to watch this? These people have insane powers, and it is very weird. a little bit predictable in terms of its story, because obviously we're telling you it's Romeo and Juliet, but just with cool ninja powers. If that doesn't dissuade you, then yeah, 100% watch Basilisk. I sort of alluded to the fact whether or not I would go back and actually watch some of the missing episodes. I will. This is available. This is out there. This is on Hulu. And as Dave mentioned, Gonzo did a great job with the animation on this. And these fighting and battle scenes are either very brutal or they are very artistic in nature as well. So, I'm on board for this. I love me some ninja battles. You throw in magical ninja battles. I'll still maybe take Charles to task and say nothing's cooler.
Nothing, Charles.
But for what it's worth, Basilisk, very cool, gets my recommendation.
Nice. 2 out of 2.
Yeah. 2 out of 2.
Next week, the sequel.
Do we want to do that? I don't know. I don't know.
Charles technically said not to, so we're contractually obligated never to cover it, I think.
Yeah.
Unless someone else calls in and says you have to cover it, and then we're back at even.
Oh, hold on a minute. Cartoon lawyer on the phone.
Oh, what's he say?
He said you're right. We're
okay,
good.
cool.
We don't have to watch it.
I've read those contracts.
We're going to watch something else.
Good to know.
Yeah. Oh, man. Well, thank you so much, Charles from Michigan, for calling in and telling us to watch Basilisk. We really appreciate it. We know that we've been sitting on this one for a little bit, and we're really glad that you stuck with us so that we could actually get into this because, as you've heard, Dave and I both love it. Yeah. So we're on board. Well, that's it. You heard him on this episode, our friend Bobby Anthem. You can hear him on his paranormal podcast, Inhuman Experience, along with his co-host Bobby Blades. Check him out on Twitter at IEXP_podcast. Bobby also has a solo show, In Search of My Lost Soul. It's in the Inhuman Experience stream. So subscribe to Inhuman Experience. Get In Search of My Lost Soul free. Actually, I mean, they're both free. How often are you paying for podcasts? You're not paying for this.
No.
Enjoy. You can find it anywhere the podcasts are available, Apple, Stitcher, anywhere else. Dave, what do you got going on, buddy?
Same old stuff, bud. You can find me over at collider.com, editing all kinds of stuff. You can chat me up on Twitter at DrClawMD and yell at me about spoilers or whatever else you want. You can also check out my book, The Science of Breaking Bad, from MIT Press, available on Amazon and wherever else books are sold. How about you, bud? What's going on? What's new?
I typically do live improv comedy with a group that's called Nox,
but
N-O-X exclamation point, in Washington, D.C. But guess what? We are all living through a moment. We actually are doing improv shows that are online.
Nice.
If you're interested in watching a show, just go over to witdc.org. They have tickets. I believe they're free. You could possibly watch me from the comfort of your own living room.
Just like me.
On a show. Yeah. So you can check it out. It is witdc.org, and we are Nox. Check us out. I'm always on Instagram and Twitter at Sean Paul Ellis. I'm probably drawing pictures of bug snacks right now.
So good.
I don't know. I'm just thinking about bug snacks.
Who isn't?
For PlayStation 5. Just very excited about that. And you can also hear my comedy podcast, my improvised comedy podcast. It's called The Bureau. It posits what is it like for 4 people who work for the FBI to suddenly start a podcast in a break room. That's The Bureau. You can check it out. It has notable guests that we've had on our show, such as Isabel Galbraith, as well as also Jamal Newman, who are on it, and our friend Jesse Chimes. It's the 4 of us just joking around. It is a 100% improvised podcast, and we have completed the 2nd season. I think we are in the process of releasing that. Episodes come out on Saturdays. So check it out and let us know what you think.
And also, everybody let Sean know a happy birthday, because by the time you're hearing this, it will have been Sean's birthday. So if you're listening to this point in the podcast, first of all, we love you. Second of all, say happy birthday to Sean. Happy birthday, bud.
Thanks, gang. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Speaking of my birthday, if you want a very nice birthday gift to me, go over to our Patreon. You can go to our Patreon, search Saturday Mourning Cartoons. Remember, it's morning with a U. And you can become a patron. We really appreciate it. We are moving, and by we I mean Dave is moving in the direction of working to actually produce and create some original content and animation. It'll be a lot of fun. Go over there. You can support us. Also, because we don't understand how Apple iTunes works, because it is a black hole of the internet, just tell a friend that you think would like this. If you want to write a review, awesome. Thank you so much for everybody who has. Just tell a friend. We've been around for so long. We really do appreciate it, and we think other people will enjoy the show too. Want to slide into our DMs on Twitter? At Morning Tunes. Remember, morning with a U. Check us out on Instagram and Facebook at Saturday Mourning Cartoons. Drop us an old-fashioned email, saturdaymorningcartoons@gmail.com. You can find all of this in the link tree, which is in the bio for all of our social media accounts, as well as also the way that Charles recommended and called in to tell us to watch Basilisk this week. You can also listen to us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, anywhere fine podcasts are sold. Thank you, Charles from Michigan, for telling us to watch this. We really do appreciate it, and we'll be back next week.
We got through the entire episode without a Charles in Charge joke.
Really?
Yeah.
You just...
That was it. That was the joke.
That's the joke.
Congrats, Charles.
That's the tweet.
See you next time.
Hey, everybody. Thanks a lot for listening to Saturday Mourning Cartoons. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to transform and roll out.